The Olympics are starting to ramp down. The U.S. women win gold. The men from U.S. and Canada are going to the semifinals. We'll talk about that, and the NHL going to start again soon. Coming up next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And thank you for helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. I'm here every Friday with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. And happy Friday, Rachel.
Happy Friday, man. We're recording this in the aftermath of the U.S. women's gold medal, which I am thrilled about. Sorry to you if you are Canadian.
But sorry, not sorry, you mean.
Sorry, not sorry. But it was a fantastic game. And I'm thrilled for Team USA, but there's some interesting things that are going to happen in the aftermath of it in terms of, is Hockey Canada gonna reevaluate how they put their roster together moving forward? Because it was a definite strategy difference between the two teams, and it worked out for Team USA. It did not for Team Canada. So there's going to be a lot of soul searching and some decisions made moving forward.
No doubt. And they have a couple of years to figure that out as they have to get a roster ready for 4 years from now. And you kind of get the feeling there'll be a lot of turnover there in Team Canada.
Yeah. Yep. I think so.
We shall see how the Canadian Olympic Committee reacts to all of this. But the Olympic break is coming to an end. Sunday, the games will be done, and something called the NHL will actually be starting up again soon. It's been a little strange here having a February with barely any NHL hockey. What are you looking forward to most about the return of the NHL?
I'm very much looking forward to the awkwardness of the transition back to club teams when you have the countries that maybe just battled each other for a gold medal coming to have to play together on the same team. That'll be fun. They're professionals. It'll be fine, but it's fun for us and the narratives that come with that. But it is interesting, right? Because teams are practicing now. And some of them are missing key players because they're still over in Italy. And, how do you kind of reboot your season when you're kind of missing some of those players and maybe you're out of the routine a little bit because this is a weird length break, right? It's not as short as an all-star break. It's not as long as an off-season break. But in some ways, to me, you kind of have to treat it like training camp.
Almost. I think, look, the players who were in the Olympics, they've been playing hockey straight through and practicing as well the whole time. But, they have to deal with their own issues, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the show. But, yeah, it is going to be a little bit weird for players to ramp back up after a 2-week, roughly, break. And, you could talk about, teams are practicing right now, and that's really great. They don't have all their line mates. Most teams have at least one Olympian, if not multiple. But practice is not the same intensity level as a game. And the majority of players across the NHL are going to be 2.5 weeks without the intensity of a game. So it's not quite training camp. It's longer than the All-Star game or the Four Nations break that we had a year ago. It's going to be interesting to see how teams handle it. I know, for example, the Islanders, Patrick Waugh basically said that the first practice was low intensity, but focused on certain things, getting the players back into the swing of things. But guys are going to have different, levels of preparedness mentally and physically, I think.
Right. And it's interesting because, from a Flyers perspective, obviously these are the teams that we cover. So
Right.
they're the teams that we know about the most in terms of their approach to these practices. But head coach Rick Tocchet is with Team Canada, right? So we have assistant coaches running the show for the Flyers, which is interesting, but also helpful in some ways, I think, just having a fresh perspective in terms of who's leading the practice. But they specifically spent this week having high intensity practices, not low, but high, to get the fitness back into,
Right.
after the 4 or 5 days off where everybody went to the beach, right? And then they're taking one day off, and they were only working on specific situational play in close, tight battle work, right? High intensity, high octane kind of practices, taking a day off. And then they're going to fold in like 5-on-5 action, right? Starting over the weekend. And then they'll get everybody back on like Tuesday, probably.
Right.
And things will get going. But, if you want to make the assumption that Canada makes the gold medal game, then Rick Tocchet won't be back until Monday at the absolute earliest, right? And the first Flyers game is Wednesday. So that's like one day of practice with your head coach back. And that's what's so interesting to me about this transition back into the NHL, just because of the intensity of this short form tournament that everybody's been paying attention to. But then how do you keep it going from a momentum perspective with your NHL club?
It is tricky. And, you sort of add the fact that both before and after the Olympic break, because NHL players were participating in the Olympics, you've got a compressed schedule. So
Right.
it's not just the normal, 2-3 games a week. There are sometimes 4 or 5 games in a week and back-to-backs. So these players are going to have to hit the ground running,
Right.
because they don't have any alternative, really.
No, absolutely. And that's what makes it such a challenge. And I think that, the teams that have the fewest Olympic participants are going to have the easiest time in terms of making that transition in some ways. But in others, it's going to be a team by team evaluation in terms of, can they keep momentum flowing? Can they keep, the energy going from before the break if a team was doing well? And if a team was not doing well, on the reverse side of things, how are they utilizing this break in terms of, like, for instance, again, with the Flyers, just because I know more of what they're doing, tons of video work happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coaches are talking specifically about extended video review sessions there as well.
That makes sense. And, I think for teams that were struggling before the break, it's a mental reset. And I think
Right.
that could be very helpful if first of all, some of your injured players can heal. They can come back without missing as many games as they otherwise would have. But just psychologically, if you're, in a losing 5 out of 6 games, let's say, not playing for a couple of weeks and sort of clearing the air allows you to reset. But then I look at the flip side. The Columbus Blue Jackets were on a 7-game winning streak at the time of the Olympic break. I'm pretty sure they would have preferred the break not come right then and there.
Oh, I'm sure. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Buffalo too, right? Because they've been on a heater, but their last game before the break was a loss.
Right.
And so has that been sitting with them this whole time? Right. And so does that like get erased from their memory? And is this a new start for them in terms of continuing winning ways? Or is it going to be the same Sabres team? Like, that is one of the other teams that is of interest to me on that front.
And then I guess the bigger picture question is, how important is how coaches approach this? Because a good coach can focus his team, and maybe, a good coach can get a team like Columbus or Buffalo, who is playing well before the break, to just sort of get back in step. And a good coach could take a team that was on a losing streak and focus them to reboot. But if your coach has lost the locker room, or if your coach is ineffective or not well prepared, that could derail you for a few games coming back from the break.
Right. And then, you have a team like Carolina, right, who won 3 in a row prior to the break, but they built themselves at least an 8-point cushion right now in the division. I mean, the Pens have a game in hand on them, but they have an 8-point cushion. So even if they falter coming out of the gate when they return, they did the work beforehand.
Right.
So in some ways, like they have it a little easier.
Well, the teams that are up in the standings have a margin for error that teams that are in the middle of the pack struggling for those playoff spots do not have. And that's why, a team like Columbus, who is still on the outside looking in after a 7-game winning streak, but is very close, they don't have that margin for error. They still need to hit the ground running and start accumulating more points to get to one of those final playoff spots.
So it should be a very fascinating re-entry process for all teams, and with the different players feeling different ways about it. But there's a lot to think about coming back from the break.
There is, and it's going to be fun to watch. I, for one, I've enjoyed the Olympics, but I am looking forward to the return of NHL hockey next week. No doubt about that. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We'll talk a little bit about the Olympic effect. We'll talk about the women, the American women beating Canada in overtime to win the gold medal. And we'll preview the men's semis. All of that and more next on today's Locked On NHL podcast. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? Well, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you're automatically entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick cash, but it can also send you to the finals. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Rachel, teams are going to come back from the Olympics. How do you think the Olympic experience and what's been going on there will impact some teams?
Well, I mean, the most obvious is the injuries, right? And this show has talked about, Kevin Fiala most specifically and the most significant injury, especially because the Kings had made some moves to try and make a run right beforehand. And now this is not helpful for them. I mean, luckily, not luckily, I don't know how you want to frame it, but we do have some time before the trade deadline and they can make additional moves if they think, they still want to go for it in some ways. But I think the injuries are going to potentially change what teams are like coming out of the gate and how they're going to approach things coming into the trade deadline. We don't know what's going on with Sidney Crosby yet. That's a big question, but there's other guys who are banged up, Josh Morrissey continues to be a question. So there's all sorts of things related to the injuries.
Yeah, the injuries are definitely key. And look, we don't know the specifics on Sidney Crosby. He could play in the next game, or he could be out for a while. We don't know yet, but boy, his leadership alone on Pittsburgh would be a big loss if he's not available to start. And Pittsburgh is very tight in the standings. They're in second place in the Metro right now, but they don't have a lot of margin for error either.
They don't. Although I don't want to see a very mad Evgeny Malkin. That's for sure. And he's going to be pissed if Crosby's actually hurt and can't play.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about that.
He's already mad about Russia not being able to participate in the Olympics. This is like adding insult to injury for him.
Yeah, he would be rather angry, and the first team that has to face him coming out of the break, I would feel sorry for in certain ways. Do you think there's more of an advantage for players who had this time off, or players who were playing in the Olympics and still in game mentality and game shape, but also have to deal with jet lag, a different time zone, uh, and all that goes with that?
Well, I think it depends on if you win or not, right? Because some of that goes out of the window if you're coming home with some hardware.
Well, maybe it also
That
depends
may be
on,
gold, right?
yeah, but it may also depend on how you celebrate that win. That has an impact as well.
Yeah, I think that part of it is not an issue, but there's going to be a certain point, and I remember this, specifically with Four Nations and like Travis Sanheim in particular. Like, he was running on fumes and adrenaline the first game back. It was like that second or third game, we were like, oh my God, he's tired, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think that's where you're going to see it in players' second or third game back, that it's all going to catch up with them, and it, they could recover. They may not quickly, depending on how their schedule plays out and what kind of ice time, but like our coach is going to manage those players ice time a little differently.
I would think they'd have to. But then you know what? You get caught up in a game, you're down a goal with 5 minutes left. You want to send your best players out there, whether they're
Yeah.
tired or not. It's so tempting. You could plan it to slow them down, cut their minutes down. But when push comes to shove and then the game is on the line, especially with the standings as close as they are, it would not surprise me if a coach just taps that guy on the shoulder and says, "You're up."
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it is also going to be very interesting to see if this changes any strategies at the trade deadline for any teams, not just related to injuries, but if guys come back motivated because they just want a gold medal and they want to keep it running, right? Our team's going to build around that, and a team puts together a streak that puts them closer or in playoff position. I don't necessarily think anybody's going to change from like buyer to seller,
No.
but I think decisions that get made could absolutely be affected by how the Olympic tournament plays out.
And I also wonder this. You have what, about a week and a half after games resume until the trade deadline? You
Hmm.
have these players coming back from the Olympics. They may be tired. It may cost teams some games as a result of that. But if your team loses 3 games in a row before the trade deadline, does that impact how teams react if it makes them more likely to be buyers or sellers?
Yeah, our team's going to make rash decisions because of this, but yeah, this is going to be one of the more interesting run up to the playoffs that we've seen in a long time because of all this. And I think that, when we're looking at the impact of the Olympics, the NHL is going to have to pay a lot of attention to it in terms of how it does affect the remainder of the NHL season, and take that into consideration when they're doing their World Cup that they're planning in 2 years, and look at the schedule and the compressed schedule and how that affected injuries and travel and all of that in terms of fitness and readiness, and then look at coming back from the break and the domino effects that it had afterwards into the playoffs. So there's going to be a lot of learning lessons coming out of this.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And look, I think so far that there have been more injuries this year as a result of the compressed schedule. I would have to
Hmm.
try to do some research on the specific number, but just observationally, it feels like there have been more injuries this year as a result of the compressed schedule. Do you feel similarly?
It's one of those things that I don't think you can get specific data about it. Like, you'll have to look at the overall injuries and say, yeah, did they go up, or how
Right.
many, man games were lost this season, right? And if it goes up, then you have to at least consider that this is part of the reason why.
Yeah, I would think that is true. I mean, it's one of those things where, to me, ultimately, because the players want to play in the Olympics and because the NHL feels they can grow the game by playing in the Olympics, unless the numbers are devastating, they're going to go again in 4 years.
Oh, sure. And they'll get player feedback on it. Absolutely. And there'll be more negotiations with the Players Association and all of that. But and especially with the ice situation and all of that, and the buildings, the rinks not being constructed on time, and there's going to be some there'll be some meetings, I'll tell you that.
Yes. Would it make sense to you during an Olympic year to start the season a week earlier and end it a week later, just on Olympic years, just to decompress the schedule a little bit?
I mean, probably. I would say so. It's certainly something they should consider.
We'll see if they do. We based on history, the NHL never fails to fail on these things, but we'll see whether or not they can work that out. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We'll talk about the American women beating Canada to win the gold medal in overtime. We'll preview the men's semis and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast. Rachel, let's start with the women. First of all, congratulations to the American women, but I got to give credit to Canada as well, because they played one heck of a game. This was just great hockey, period.
Yeah, it was incredible. And I've been watching women's hockey since they started in the Olympics in 98, and been through the ups and downs of all of this. And I think, my big takeaways from it are, again, like I said at the top of the show, there's going to be some soul searching in terms of roster construction for Canada, in terms of, do we build a roster to beat Team USA in a gold medal game, or do we build a team that is meant to play consistently throughout an entire tournament, right? And as the other teams get better, and they did, as we saw, it wasn't easy for Canada to get to that final, that's for sure. Like, Switzerland made it very difficult. Sweden, Switzerland, and Czechia, I think, to a slightly lesser degree of success, figured out how to play USA and Canada to at least make it difficult for them.
They did. And I think another question about Canada, they went with a very veteran lineup. Do you think they try to get younger in 4 years? Because the United States had a younger roster than the Canadians did.
Right. And that's the roster construction conversation that I'm talking about, right? It's when you're building a team to win against Team USA in a gold medal game, you want the veteran leadership there who've been there before, who know how to do it and have gotten the job done previously, whether it's in a world championship, whether it's in the Olympics the last time around. I think that is what they chose to do. Team USA incorporated a whole bunch of college players who were phenomenal in this tournament. And did they play as well in the gold medal game? They didn't, to some degree. Some did, some didn't. But I think that they gained all that experience throughout the tournament, and being in that gold medal game, they know what it feels like to win. They can run it back the next time around with the kids who are younger than them, right?
Yeah.
So it's a more sustainable model, in my opinion. And again, with these other teams who are getting better, I would hope certainly that the Switzerland Federation puts more money into their women's team and to hockey overall, because I think both the men's team and the women's team performed extremely well in the tournament this year. Sweden came back with a bang. They had been sort of fake relegated into Group B, right? But they dominated Group B. They came in and played extremely well against Group A teams. And, Switzerland had it a little bit easier because they were at the bottom of Group A, didn't have to prove themselves as much earlier. They played well, don't get me wrong, but it was a different kind of tournament for each of them. my big hope is that the next time around they change the organization of the group, so it's not Group A is the top teams, Group B is the next tier, that there's a mix and match.
Yeah, I would prefer that as well. Also, I really don't like 3-on-3 overtimes, and I don't think shootouts have any place in deciding medals. But that's a different argument for a different day, and that was true for both the men and the women's tournaments. I mean, 3-on-3 overtime is exciting, but it's not the same as playing 5-on-5 hockey.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I hope they fix that too.
Yeah, I would like to see that. The men, we have the semifinals coming up, both the United States and Canada involved in those games. And I know a lot of our viewers and listeners would like to see a gold medal game between the U.S. and Canada, but it's not going to be easy. Canada facing Finland, the U.S. facing Slovakia. Your thoughts on these games?
I mean, I certainly think if you had to say Canada has the easier path to the gold medal game than Team USA, I think Slovakia has been a tremendous team in this tournament. They're the only team whose quarterfinal game did not have to go to overtime in order to move forward. They beat the German team pretty handily. And like I said, they've gotten tremendous goaltending this tournament, and they've just figured out how to play defensively against their individual opponents. I'd say they're probably the most prepared team in this tournament, like by a mile. And it showed because they have tailored their game to each opponent. And so I do think USA is going to have a harder time with Slovakia. Finland's play has been uneven. They I think got lucky in a lot of ways in their quarterfinal game. And, coming back was difficult, but I just truly think that Finland's play has been a lot more uneven than any of the other three teams.
They have been uneven, but they have also been resilient, and I have to give them credit for that.
Absolutely. And they have a fantastic blue line, right? So if they can get it together, like Team Canada is going to have a hard time getting through that.
Canada is so deep. I mean, this has got to be the deepest.
Like even
roster.
Without Crosby.
Yeah, they can win without Crosby. It's easier. I mean, he is their captain. He is the guy who's been there and done that more than anybody on that roster. But they have the talent and the depth to win without Sidney Crosby. And we'll see. What is your prediction? Do we get a USA-Canada gold medal game, or do we see an upset?
I mean, I'm going to say it's going to be Canada-Slovakia for the gold, and then USA versus Finland for the bronze.
Okay. I think US and Canada will meet for the gold. It'll be close. Wouldn't surprise me to see another 3-on-3 overtime, but we'll see how that ends up playing out. But I think Canada has to be the favorite for the gold at this point. I mean, they are just so good. So good.
Yeah. And the good news for me personally is that USA won the women's tournament. So who cares who wins the men's?
Ooh.
I'm just in it for the hockey. I want good hockey for the remainder of this tournament.
Wait a minute. You're patriotic for the women and you're indifferent for the men as far as that goes?
No, because the men's team I was rooting for is out. So I was on Team Czechia. So for Dan Vladar. I was supporting my goalie.
Okay. I hear you.
So there was a method. There was a reasoning behind it.
There is a method to your madness. All I know is that we are in for some very good hockey over the last couple of days of this tournament. And I hope caliber-wise and excitement-wise that the men can live up to what we saw in the gold medal game from the women, because it was just outstanding. That winning goal, I mean, highlight reel
Megan
stuff.
Keller.
Unbelievable. That is stuff that you should be showing your kids and your grandkids. And I mean, it was just outstanding.
Yeah. And I know, like, I posted afterwards about it, and I was like, Megan Keller, I owe you 1,000 beers and my therapy bills, because I'm going to be talking about that for a long time.
Yeah, and if you buy her 1,000 beers, you won't be able to afford the therapy bill. But
that's right.
All right. Well, If you never miss an episode of your favorite team's Locked On podcast, then the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get your favorite team's podcast ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. So head to the link in the show notes for more information. So check it out. It's a lot of great stuff there on the Everydayers Club. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Friday, for Locked On NHL. We also have Locked On NHL Game Night on this channel, and we have our squad shows as well. The next one coming up at 6 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. So wall-to-wall hockey coverage here on Locked On NHL. And I will be back on Monday's Locked On NHL, interviewing 3 of our local hosts about the biggest stories from around the league. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.